Ever wondered if Hollywood's golden idols smelled as dazzling as they looked? Spoiler: some leading men, and women, could clear a soundstage faster than a failed screen test. Stick around as we reveal the eyebrow-raising, nostril-flaring hygiene secrets of Tinseltown's brightest legends. Trust us, you'll never watch a classic the same way again. Clark Gable. Frankly, my dear, I do give a whew. Vivien Leigh wasn't being dramatic when she complained that kissing Gable was like leaning into a dental supply closet gone sour. By 1939, Hollywood's king had lost most of his teeth, replacing them with ill-fitting plates that trapped food particles, tobacco residue, and morning bourbon in an aromatic symphony that director Frank Capra joked could knock you over at 10 paces. The issue wasn't lost on studios. MGM kept breath mints by the handful on his sets. Crew members on Mutiny on the Bounty developed a rotation system for passing him minutes between takes, a choreography as precisely timed as any dance number. Yet, the King of Hollywood merely shrugged, lit another cigarette, and continued commanding his empire with the casual confidence that made women swoon from theater seats. Bathing didn't rank much higher on his priority list, especially during location shoots. Loretta Young recalled that Gable's rugged charm came packaged with a musk she couldn't quite ignore, especially under Nevada's desert sun while filming The Misfits. Makeup artists developed special powders to combat shine without addressing the underlying issue, because nobody dared suggest hygiene improvements to Clark Gable. Cary Grant. Smooth tucks, crisp dialogue, impeccable timing, and a defiantly natural aroma that challenged the patience of his most ardent admirers. The man, considered Hollywood's ultimate gentleman, harbored distinctly ungentlemanly views about personal freshness that surprised many who worked with him. Grant believed commercial deodorants were chemical nonsense, to be avoided at all costs, part of his broader health philosophy that embraced natural living. This principled stance created practical challenges on set, especially during Hitchcock productions like North by Northwest, where the master director's crew kept sets unusually breezy and discreetly waved fresh air breaks into the shooting schedule whenever Grant's underarms announced themselves after action sequences. Co-star Ava Marie Saint later diplomatically described his scent as evident but not entirely unpleasant, like a man who worked hard. The studio publicity department ensured such observations never reached fan magazines, cultivating instead the image of Grant as the embodiment of sophisticated elegance. Even ex-wife Diane Cannon wrote in her memoir that his health food philosophy extended to skipping antiperspirant entirely, considering it unnatural and potentially harmful. She noted his bathroom contained expensive colognes, but conspicuously lacked basic grooming products most men took for granted. Jean Harlow. Start with peroxide, add ammonia, repeat weekly. That was the punishing formula behind cinema's first and most iconic platinum blonde. The chemical cocktail that created Harlow's trademark white blonde hair burned her scalp raw and emitted what one set visitor called a distinct chemical smell that lingered long after she'd left her dressing room. What gossip columnists whispered about, but never published, was that the unusual sweet but sour odor that sometimes clung to her mink wraps and satin gowns went beyond hair treatments. Doctors later identified it as a symptom of the kidney failure that would claim her life at just 26 years old, producing uremic breath that makeup artists tried to mask with extra perfume on set. Studio fixers worked overtime ensuring the public never glimpsed the physical toll behind the platinum image. MGM's publicity department flooded magazines with stories about Harlow's natural beauty regimen, while privately employing 2 full-time hairdressers, whose sole responsibility was maintaining the punishing bleach schedule that left her scalp perpetually irritated and malodorous. Errol Flynn. Picture Robin Hood, who'd rather sword fight than soap up, a dashing adventurer whose off-screen habits would have made Sherwood Forest's outlaws seem fastidious by comparison. Errol Flynn approached personal hygiene with the same casual disregard he showed for studio schedules and conventional morality. Wardrobe departments throughout Hollywood shared horror stories about Flynn's cavalier approach to costume care. He sometimes wore the same tights for weeks during filming of swashbucklers like The Adventures of Robin Hood, Marinating Sweat, Rum Residue, and Cigarette Ash, until costume supervisors literally begged for mercy. One wardrobe assistant reportedly quit Warner Brothers after being assigned to handle Flynn's laundry during the Seahawk. Co-stars dared not complain. The rogue's grin was career insurance, and studios protected their investment. But makeup artists adapted by keeping bowls of cloves and other aromatic herbs on set to place strategically around lighting equipment. The heat would release their scent, creating a natural barrier between cast members and Flynn's increasingly ripe presence, especially during extended action sequences. Flynn himself laughed off any gentle suggestions about freshening up, reportedly telling director Michael Curtis, "My dear fellow, adventure first, bathtub later, maybe." That devil-may-care attitude extended to every aspect of his tumultuous life, ultimately contributing to his premature decline and death at just 50, his legend of dashing rebellion intact, both on screen and off. Elmo Lincoln, Hollywood's first Tarzan, didn't just look at the part of a jungle dweller. According to numerous accounts, he smelled the part too. Elmo Lincoln, who pioneered the role in 1918's silent Tarzan of the Apes, brought method acting to new olfactory heights decades before Brando popularized immersive techniques. Crew members from that pioneering production reported that Lincoln skipped basic washing for days at a time during shooting, letting loincloth grime and stage light sweat blend into a pungent jungle funk that one assistant director described as authentic to the character but challenging to the cast. The primitive shooting conditions of early Hollywood exacerbated the situation. Open-air sets with minimal facilities meant that personal freshness was often sacrificed for efficiency. Under the 1920s, arc lights without modern ventilation or air conditioning, the aroma became so thick that extras on set reportedly called it ape atmosphere and requested positions upwind whenever possible. Female co-stars developed strategic fainting spells that required them to move to fresher air between takes. Yet audiences, blissfully separated from the sensory experience by the silent screen, cheered Lincoln's authentic portrayal. The film's success launched both the Tarzan franchise and Lincoln's career, proving that in the visual medium of silent pictures, what audiences couldn't smell couldn't hurt the box office receipts or the birth of a legendary character. Mabel Normand. Comedy pioneer Mabel Normand, Chaplin's mentor and Fatty Arbuckle's frequent co-star, brought bohemian chaos everywhere she went, both on screen and off. Her creative brilliance came packaged with what one studio executive called an allergy to personal organization that extended to every aspect of her appearance and surroundings. Her dressing rooms became legendary disaster zones. Unbrushed hair scattered across vanities, makeup-smeared pillows where she napped between scenes, and a handbag that Photoplay magazine critic James R. Quirk once diplomatically compared to a mobile trash can. Fellow actresses reported that Normand often wore the same costume for days, considering wardrobe changes an unnecessary interruption to her creative process. Her Hollywood bungalow overflowed with half a dozen dogs, mostly strays she'd rescued on impulse, and half-eaten snacks abandoned when new ideas struck. The combination created what director Max Sennett called Eau de Mabel, a distinctive blend of cold cream, face powder, wet dog, and whatever food she'd most recently forgotten. The frenetic pace and chaotic lifestyle eventually caught up with Normand. Tuberculosis, exacerbated by years of self-neglect, ended her life at just 37, cutting short one of early cinema's most innovative careers. Yet insiders still recall with affection the lovable creative whirlwind and the lingering scent of wet terrier and grease paint that announced her arrival on any set. Humphrey Bogart. Here's looking at you, kid, but maybe not standing downwind. The man who embodied hard-boiled cool on screen approached personal hygiene with a minimalism that matched his acting style. Stripped down to essentials, with numerous elements simply left out entirely. Socks? Bogey didn't bother changing them during an entire production, said a grip who worked on Casablanca. The practical effects were predictable. Shoes soaked in perpetual sweat fermented until the smell preceded him onto set, creating what director John Huston affectionately termed the Bogart barometer. Crew members claimed they could gauge his proximity by the increasing foot funk without ever turning around. Studio technicians developed workarounds, strategic fans placed near his mark, extra ventilation between takes, and, in extreme cases, wardrobe assistants who would sneak fresh socks into his dressing room with notes claiming they were part of the character development. Bogart, ever the professional, would sometimes accept these costume enhancements without comment. Yet the trenchcoat silhouette, that gravel voice, and the world-weary eyes made audiences forgive the foot funk they'd never experience in smell-o-vision. On screen, Bogart translated as pure essence of masculinity, proof that cinema's two-dimensional magic could transform even the most basic hygiene oversights into components of an enduring legend. Marlene Dietrich, true couture, false freshness. The German goddess who revolutionized androgynous glamour approached her legendary wardrobe with museum curator reverence that occasionally crossed into olfactory negligence. Dietrich's perfectionism had an aromatic downside that tested the devotion of her most ardent admirers. Dietrich famously refused to allow cleaners near her most elaborate costumes, fearing professional cleaning would dull the sequins, flatten the feathers, or diminish the precise drape she demanded from every garment. After days under Klieg lights, shooting musical numbers for films like The Blue Angel and Morocco, the dresses acquired what one sound technician called a heady bouquet of perfume, face powder, and pure Dietrich perspiration. Between performances, the irreplaceable gowns hung in special wardrobes, perfumed with lavender and cedar. Pleasant scents that mixed with, rather than eliminated, the underlying aroma. During her later stage career, nightclub performers who shared billing with Dietrich spoke of being trapped in an invisible fog of mingled Chanel No. 5, cigarette smoke, and the distinctive musk of garments too precious to clean. Nobody dared lecture the empress of androgynous chic about laundry schedules. Not directors, not producers, and certainly not costume designers who understood the irreplaceable quality of her wardrobe. The legend transcended the laundry basket, proving once again that star power had its own intoxicating perfume that audiences found irresistible, no matter what invisible notes it contained. Ava Gardner. North Carolina raised, and proudly au naturel, Ava Gardner approached Hollywood with a down-home frankness about bodily functions that shocked the more genteel denizens of MGM's Star Factory. The studio tried desperately to refine her image, while preserving the earthy sensuality that made her a sensation. Gardner skipped commercial deodorant entirely, trusting instead to a splash of cologne. Or, sometimes, according to her maid, borrowing her dog's toothbrush for a quick freshening up before important meetings. This improvisational approach to personal care reflected her broader rejection of Hollywood pretension, a stance that endeared her to crew members while horrifying publicity departments. Cinematographer Jack Cardiff, who shot Gardner in several productions, later wrote that close-ups came with a Carolina breeze, earthy, authentic, and distinctly Ava. He recalled positioning lights specifically to avoid raising her body temperature during crucial scenes, knowing the star's resistance to chemical antiperspirants meant higher temperatures would produce immediate olfactory results. Yet her green-eyed magnetism and raw sexual charisma canceled any complaints before they reached studio executives. Directors who might have insisted on hygiene improvements with lesser stars found themselves helplessly captivated by the same untamed quality that attracted audiences worldwide. In Gardner's case, the lack of artificial freshness became intrinsic to the authentic sensuality that made her an icon. Proof that star quality operated by its own primal rules. James Dean. Rebel without a shower. The brooding anti-hero who redefined American masculinity for the post-war generation approached personal hygiene with the same defiant rejection he brought to all conventional expectations. Dean's cultivated dishevelment wasn't just an image. It was a lifestyle choice that challenged Hollywood's glamour machine. Dean notoriously wore the same jeans until they practically stood up by themselves, held together by safety pins and stubbornness. He arrived at rehearsals barefoot regardless of weather or studio rules, and changed clothes only when a producer bribed him with new ones, a tactic Warner Brothers employed repeatedly during filming of East of Eden. Director Nicholas Ray recalled having to physically block Dean from set on Rebel without a cause, until the actor agreed to at least rinse his hair, which had accumulated weeks of styling products, cigarette smoke, and motorcycle exhaust. The compromise. Dean would briefly rinse under a hose, but refused chemical shampoos that might diminish his authentic presentation. That unwashed authenticity read as revolutionary cool on camera, the perfect embodiment of post-war youth rebellion, even if it sniffed otherwise on set. Within months of his film's releases, teenagers across America were intentionally disheveling their appearance to capture the Dean mystique, though most stopped short of adopting his more pungent methods of achieving the look. The style survived. Thankfully, the smell remained sealed in film set memory. Robert Mitchum. Greasy pomade, cigarette ash, two-day stubble, and an attitude that dared anyone to mention it. That was Robert Mitchum's signature cocktail both on screen and off. The walking embodiment of film noir brought authentic grit to his roles, along with an approach to personal maintenance that production assistants described as strategically minimal. Western co-stars joked his hatband was half oil, half actor, after weeks on location shoots, where Mitchum's approach to bathing could generously be described as occasional. During filming of The Lusty Men, director Nicholas Ray reportedly designated a specific crew member to suggest daily showers to Mitchum, a task that rotated because nobody wanted permanent responsibility for broaching the subject with the notoriously intimidating star. His typical day involved chain-smoking unfiltered cigarettes, liberal application of hair pomade without removing the previous day's layer, and a splash of bourbon both internally and occasionally as improvised cologne. The resulting aroma became so distinctive that costume departments could identify his wardrobe items blindfolded, according to one RKO wardrobe supervisor. He sneered at Hollywood fussiness and kept right on drawing through classics like Out of the Past and Night of the Hunter, creating an archetype of masculine indifference that influenced generations of actors. The Mitchum mystique proved that authentic grit could triumph over artificial freshness, especially when packaged with his unique brand of dangerous charisma that kept audiences and reluctant directors coming back for more. Joan Fontaine. Elegance on screen, eau d'absence of soap-off. The Academy Award-winning actress, who embodied refined vulnerability in Hitchcock classics, harbored surprisingly rustic views about personal cleanliness that conflicted dramatically with her on-screen image of pristine sophistication. Fontaine believed frequent baths stripped natural oils and were fundamentally unhealthy, a philosophy she expounded upon at length to increasingly uncomfortable interviewers. This conviction led Hitchcock to quietly implement special accommodations during filming of Suspicion and Rebecca. Fresh air pumped onto closed sets, strategically placed scent sachets near cameras, and careful scheduling to film her scenes early in the day. Co-star Laurence Olivier allegedly rehearsed love scenes at arm's length, developing blocking that minimized close contact while maintaining romantic tension on screen. Fellow actors marveled at his technical precision, not realizing it was partly motivated by olfactory self-preservation rather than pure artistic choice. The irony wasn't lost on makeup artists. Fontaine might skip bathing, but spent hours on elaborate hairstyles and facial preparations. Her dressing room contained dozens of luxury creams and powders, alongside natural remedies like vinegar rinses and lemon juice astringents, creating what one studio hairdresser called a battleground between science and superstition. with her skin and hair caught in the crossfire. Montgomery Clift. Painkillers, vodka, and despair progressively derailed Montgomery Clift's once meticulous personal habits, creating a tragic trajectory that mirrored his on-screen portrayals of beautiful, damaged souls. As one of Hollywood's first method actors, his increasing neglect of basic hygiene became inseparable from his deteriorating psychological state. Following the 1956 car accident that shattered his matinee idol face, Clift's dependence on alcohol and pain medication accelerated dramatically. Friends and colleagues began leaving deodorant and fresh shirts in his trailer like offerings at a shrine, hoping he might use them without the humiliation of direct confrontation about his increasingly noticeable body odor. Director Joseph Mankiewicz once paused filming on Suddenly last summer after crew complaints reached a breaking point during a particularly humid day on set. Rather than embarrass his fragile star publicly, Mankiewicz invented a lighting emergency that required an hour break, during which he privately suggested Clift might be more comfortable after a quick shower and change of clothes. Elizabeth Taylor, his loyal friend and frequent co-star, appointed herself unofficial guardian of his dignity, often creating diversions that allowed him private moments to refresh when his condition became obvious to others. On film, though, his tortured grace remained unsullied, the camera capturing the vulnerable beauty that made his slow public decline all the more heartbreaking to witness. Joan Crawford. Paradox personified, she scoured her mansion with bleach until doorknobs shone, terrorized household staff over invisible dust, yet colleagues swore expensive Chanel No. 5 mingled with hard-earned sweat during her legendary marathon shoots at MGM and later Warner Brothers. Crawford's contradictions extended to every aspect of her carefully constructed persona. Her obsessive-compulsive approach to household cleanliness became Hollywood legend. Floors scrubbed nightly, plastic covers on furniture, guests reprimanded for water spots on bathroom fixtures. Yet this same woman would work 14-hour days under hot lights, performing physically demanding scenes repeatedly without breaks, until her signature shoulder pads were visibly damp, and her distinctive perfume had transformed into something altogether more primal. Daughter Christina remembered bleeding hands from compulsive cleaning sessions, where the star personally demonstrated the proper pressure needed for scrubbing baseboards. Evidence that order, not odor, was Crawford's true obsession. Colleagues noted that Crawford might appear slightly disheveled after punishing rehearsals, but would rather collapse from exhaustion than permit a single hair out of place in her public presentation. Bette Davis. 4 packs a day turned Davis's legendary voice husky, and her breath ferocious enough to register as a special effect. The actress, who famously declared, "Fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy night," might well have been warning co-stars about sharing her airspace as much as her dramatic talents. George Brent, who starred opposite Davis in numerous films, called her tobacco breath overpowering, like kissing an ashtray left out in the rain. Yet, he repeatedly requested her as a co-star, because her unmatched intensity made the temporary discomfort worthwhile. During production of Dark Victory, director Edmund Goulding installed special ventilation equipment around Davis's marks, disguising them as period-appropriate heating grates. Anne Baxter mastered subtle mint-passing techniques during filming of All About Eve, developing a sleight of hand worth of a magician to slip breath fresheners to Davis between takes without offending the notoriously prickly star. The crew dubbed this Operation Fresh Air and awarded Baxter an improvised medal made from tin foil at the wrap party. Davis herself remained unapologetic about her chain-smoking habit, once telling a studio executive who mentioned the issue, "I'm not paid to smell nice. I'm paid to be brilliant." She shrugged, lit up another cigarette with characteristic flourish, and proceeded to steal every scene anyway, proving that raw talent could overcome even the most persistent clouds of smoke and their aromatic aftermath. Marilyn Monroe. Behind that incandescent glow that defined 1950s, sexuality lay layers, literally, of makeup sealed nightly with petroleum jelly and rarely fully removed. Modern dermatologists view her skincare regimen with horror, but Monroe swore it kept wrinkles at bay and maintained the dewy appearance that became her trademark. According to her personal makeup artist, Whitey Snyder, Monroe sometimes slept in the full facial apparatus. Thick layer of Vaseline over cream foundation, powder, and various highlighting concoctions. The practice clogged pores and soiled sheets, creating what her housekeeper called ghost impressions on pillowcases, perfect facial imprints preserved in greasy makeup residue. The resulting morning-after complexion issues required even heavier makeup application, creating a cycle that studio dermatologists warned against, but didn't dare enforce with their most valuable asset. During filming of Some Like It Hot, director Billy Wilder reportedly installed special ultra-soft lighting to disguise the increasing texture problems resulting from years of this unorthodox regimen. Yet the camera caught only radiance, the carefully crafted illusion of effortless beauty that concealed the mechanical processes behind it. Monroe's famous quote that, "In Hollywood, they know what to do with faces," contained deeper truth than fans realized. The star system excelled at presenting perfect fantasy while burying the sometimes messy maintenance required to sustain it, especially when that maintenance violated basic skincare principles. Charlie Chaplin. The meticulous perfectionist, whose balletic comedy required dozens of takes, harbored surprisingly casual attitudes toward personal freshness during his legendary marathon shooting sprees. Chaplin would work for days without breaks, focused entirely on his art, while ignoring increasingly ripe realities. During production of masterpieces like City Lights and Modern Times, Chaplin famously skipped bathing for days at a stretch, concentrating exclusively on perfecting gags and camera angles, while letting sweat streak the tramp's distinctive grease paint. Crew members developed a rotation system for working closely with the director's star, understanding that his monomania for perfection left no room for personal maintenance. The tramp's costume, oversized shoes, tight jacket, baggy pants, became particularly problematic during extended shoots. According to assistant director Robert Flory, those iconic shoes hadn't properly dried since yesterday's rain sequence, while the rumpled suit carried traces of every pratfall and food gag from the previous week's filming. Rita Hayworth. "There never was a woman like Gilda," proclaimed the posters, but few knew the pungent reality behind cinema's most famous redhead. To preserve her signature fiery dye job, the color that transformed Hispanic actress Margarita Cancino into all-American Rita Hayworth, she oiled her scalp extensively and avoided shampooing for days, sometimes weeks. Under hot studio lamps, the combination of specialized henna dye, protective oils, and industrial-strength styling products literally fried, producing an aroma co-stars on CoverGirl, likened to a sizzling diner grill with notes of burnt hair. Cinematographer Rudolph Mattei recalled positioning lights specifically to minimize heat on Hayworth's head during the famous "Put the Blame on Mame" sequence, fearing the accumulated products might begin actively smoking under direct illumination. Studio hairdressers became expert at creating the illusion of freshly washed brightness, while actually adding more products to already laden tresses. The continuity department kept detailed records of exactly how many days had passed since the last actual washing, knowing that water would require complete re-dyeing, a process Hayworth's damaged hair could only tolerate monthly at most. Veronica Lake. The peekaboo bang that launched 1,000 imitators hid a secret that studio executives tried desperately to keep from the public. Lake washed her hair so rarely that it could clear a set, according to frequent co-star William Bendix. The distinctive blonde wave that fell seductively over one eye required such elaborate styling that Lake refused to risk disturbing it with regular washing. The famous hairstyle created practical problems beyond basic hygiene. The heavy lacquer required to maintain the wave's perfect shape accumulated dust, cigarette smoke, and food particles throughout multi-week shoots. Director René Clair scheduled emergency perfume spritzes between takes of I Married a Witch, stationing assistants just off camera with atomizers of Chanel No. 5 that were deployed whenever the breeze shifted unfavorably. Paramount executives eventually added a specific hygiene clause to Lake's contract, requiring professional washing and styling twice weekly, regardless of shooting schedule. The star bitterly contested this unprecedented intrusion, arguing that frequent washing would damage both her signature look and the studio's investment in her carefully crafted image. Spencer Tracy. The actor, renowned for his natural, unaffected performances, brought an equally natural approach to personal grooming that posed unique challenges for his longtime co-star and off-screen partner, Katharine Hepburn. Tracy's combination of alcohol-induced sweats and increasingly loose attitudes toward basic hygiene created what one MGM makeup artist called the Tracy Challenge, making the star presentable without mentioning the underlying issues. As his drinking increased in later years, Tracy's body odor became a barometer of his consumption, with crew members on Guess Who's Coming to Dinner developing an informal scale that measured sobriety by proximity tolerance. Director Stanley Kramer recalled positioning actors in certain scenes specifically to accommodate changing air currents on outdoor shoots. Katharine Hepburn, fiercely protective of both Tracy's dignity and his public image, battled the issue pragmatically with open windows, strategically placed fresh flowers, and scented handkerchiefs that appeared in scenes with suspicious frequency. During their final film together, she reportedly arrived hours early to air out his dressing room and lay out fresh clothes with notes suggesting they were new costumes requiring testing. Greta Garbo. I want to be alone. Perhaps the most famous line associated with cinema's most enigmatic star contained layers of meaning beyond public understanding. Garbo's legendary reclusiveness served practical purposes beyond mystique building. It helped mask the fact that she disliked bathing with nearly the same intensity that she disliked publicity. Despite earning millions, Garbo lived simply, a choice studio publicists pitched as philosophical rather than practical. A maid who briefly worked in her New York apartment later wrote that the star re-wore outfits until odors rivaled midtown laundry piles, and considered daily bathing an American obsession that she proudly rejected. On set, the issue created diplomatic challenges for directors already intimidated by her artistic temperament. Clarence Brown, who directed her in multiple successes, developed a system of technical delays that coincided with particularly ripe moments, during which her dresser would suggest a costume adjustment requiring momentary privacy and proximity to soap and water. Mae West. Why don't you come up and smell me sometime? Wasn't quite how the famous invitation went, but it might have been more accurate. The body queen of innuendo, who made censors blush firmly, believed that baths were bad for the natural oils, opting instead for clouds of taboo perfume so thick they sometimes visibly diffused stage lights during filming. West's dressing room resembled a perfume factory explosion, with dozens of bottles arranged by purpose rather than scent. Morning refreshers, afternoon enhancers, and evening seducers. Her personal assistant's primary duty was refreshing the star's fragrance cloud approximately hourly, applying different notes depending on which body part would be featured in upcoming scenes. Directors aired her sets like smoky jazz clubs, installing special fans that activated between takes. Cameramen learned to anticipate the density of her perfume cloud when calculating lighting requirements, knowing that particularly freshly sprayed moments could create a visible haze under certain conditions. During summer shoots, crew members on She Done Him Wrong drew straws to determine who would work closest to the star's position. Lon Chaney. The man of 1,000 faces brewed almost as many distinctive smells: collodion adhesive, spirit gum, theatrical putty, and even toxic lead-based paint entered his personal chemistry experiment in service of his revolutionary makeup effects. Creating the Phantom's skull-like visage, he wired his nostrils, glued custom appliances, and applied caustic chemicals for days at a stretch, developing a signature aroma that makeup artists still discuss in hushed, respectful tones. Professional obligations extended beyond the makeup chair. During production of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Chaney wore his elaborate hump and body restraints for so many consecutive hours that assistant directors scheduled outdoor scenes specifically to ventilate the accumulated body odor trapped within the complex apparatus. Costume designers created special removable panels that could be cleaned overnight, while preserving the overall shape of his specialized outfits. Fellow actors kept windows open whenever possible and developed a system of lavender oil-soaked handkerchiefs that they could casually raise to their faces during particularly close interactions with Chaney's more pungent creations. Far from being offended, Chaney considered their reactions proof of his successful physical transformation. If his colleagues could smell the monster, he reasoned, he had truly become it. Moviegoers experienced only the visual shock of his incredible transformations, never imagining that each monstrous creation carried its own distinctive olfactory signature. Further proof that cinema's greatest makeup genius understood his art extended beyond what cameras could capture to create a complete sensory experience for everyone on set. If these backstage bombshells made you gasp, gag, or grin, smash that like button and share the aroma-filled truth with fellow film buffs. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell, so you'll be first in line when we unearth the next untold chapter of movie history.